If you just look at foreclosures and pre-foreclosures, that's a popular list that people run. But for inexperienced people, they're leading with the pre-foreclosure. I know you're in pre-foreclosure. I know you're in foreclosure. Bro, are you kidding me? First of all, nobody wants to admit that. Two, why don't you just tell them that they've committed a crime?
What is going on, guys? On today's episode of the Collecting Keys Real Estate Investing Podcast, we have Jonathan Greene, who is a true, deep down real estate veteran who has been involved in real estate since the 70s when he was growing up with his dad to, up even now. He owns a very successful real estate team. He's owned all kinds of different assets. And he is one of the, I would say, most passionate real estate investors that we've had on the show that just really loves the game and loves real estate.
Yeah, he loves the game. He's been in it a long time, but he's still, you can tell is the day-to-day of real estate still involved in it.
Yeah.
Still likes it.
He's not all jaded and burned out like most people are, even
after he hasn't
years.
Stepped into I did it in the 70s with my dad. Now I run a syndication.
Exactly. He's just, he's just doing the fundamentals extremely well. And the thing that I love too about this episode, Dan, is he goes into all these different tactics about how he has found properties that are isn't the traditional mass marketing. It is very pointed stuff. It's awesome for people that are looking to get started, that are on a budget, that, don't know how exactly they're going to stretch their dollar to be able to make investments, where you're kind of balancing the acquisition versus the marketing and all that sort of stuff. He has a great solution for you, so you don't have to worry about that problem anymore.
He shared 3 of his 7 favorite niche letters is what I would call them, super, or he called it micromarketing.
Yep.
Yeah, I can guarantee you, if you do what he said and use that copy, you will get a deal, and you won't have to spend very much money doing it.
No, you have to spend a little bit of time, but that's a trade-off for money, right? Money allows you to not have to spend the time, but if you have more time than money, then you should definitely try these micromarketing methods. So anyways, guys, he's really an incredible wealth of knowledge. I know you will get a ton out of this episode. Absolutely reach out to him. He's a really solid guy. I've, been following him a lot on Instagram and everything else he's involved in since he came on this show and since I was on his show a few weeks ago. And, he's more than happy to chat with people too. He will bring you value just because he's so into real estate. So absolutely hit him up. So guys, please share this episode with anyone who might find it interesting. You can also go to collectingkeyspodcast.com/free to get our free 5-step guide for generating off-market leads. And besides that, enjoy the show, guys. It's a really great one. All right, Jonathan Greene. We have a true veteran here today, and I am so excited, man. I was on your podcast not too long ago, and we built a good bond there just on our kind of shared, interests and knowledge and sort of different real estate specific things. And you have been involved in so many different parts of the real estate business and for a long time. So super excited to have you on the show. So for people who don't know about you, maybe give us the background, where you came from, how you got into real estate, and all the stuff that you've been working on in your long tenure in this business.
Yeah, sure. Dan and Mike, I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm looking forward to it. So I grew up with a dad who was an attorney, but also his really primary job was investing in real estate, which I didn't really understand at the time why he was dragging me around to yard sales every single weekend. We go to 9-10 yard sales, get a crappy football at every one, which was fine with me. But then I didn't realize that he was making offers on all those homes. He was way ahead of his time. So he used to pull all the foreclosure lists. He knew all the clerks. So we would go to foreclosures. He would push me through the window. This is old school. This is in the 70s. I'm old, seasoned, but old. So there was no internet. You get the list from the courthouse. Most of them were vacant. If they were vacant, I'd go in, through a window, open the door. Someone was commenting on something saying oh, you were trespassing. I'm this is 1970s. This is literally how they told you to do it. It was vacant, but there was no lock boxes. They didn't even have really code boxes at the time. So as I grew up in that, I guess I didn't realize how much I was learning. And then as I became 18, 20, I started really paying attention. I would come home in the summers from college and I would manage my dad's rental properties, and he would just leave me the ledger at the time, which was on paper. And he'd say, well, here's all the collections that you need to get. He'd have 20, 30 rental properties. And he's like, you need to collect them. And I was like, well, why aren't there X's in all the boxes? He's like, oh, well, they haven't been paying. Like, oh, great. He's like, yeah, it's your job to figure out how to get the money. So I figured it out. And I think that's kind of where I started to really understand real estate. He put real estate in my name when I was young. So I was at properties and understanding them. But it was really like 18 to 20 where I was like, I think I can do this my whole life, regardless of my jobs.
Cool. Wow. That's crazy. So you just like put you out, you know, knocking on doors of these people who weren't paying. Like, how did you figure out how to get the money? Like, do you have a sales pitch, or you were like trying to?
No, I'm like, it's funny because I'm obviously a licensed agent too. I always say I'm a terrible salesperson. I'm a great advisor. And I think I learned a lot from my dad in that collections wasn't hard collections. Like, you're going to pay or I'm going to kick you out. I think that's probably how I thought. You know, I was 18. I'm like, you know, I'll just tell them I'll kick them out. He's like, that's not really how, you know, landlord tenancy works in New York. So I try to find out, you know, what their pain point was, what the expectation was, when we could expect payment. Could they start paying a little bit? And then I also just realized that my dad had a tremendous empathy for the tenants and being a landlord. He wasn't in it to squeeze people. He was not a slumlord. He liked to help people. And, you know, he did a lot of investments. I learned a lot. We basically, I would go to his house on the weekends. And then the second that the house had everything that we wanted, it was like our favorite house ever. He would tell us we're moving. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? We're moving. He's like, well, yeah, this is how much money we're going to make on the house. I said, okay, then that makes sense. And then we go and do it again. So I lived in flip houses growing up all the time and kind of understood. And, you know, I did put my kids through that, you know, as well, because I like moving. So I would move and move, fix a house, move. You know, I think part of that helped them a lot, but part of it was a little bit less stable.
Right. I mean, you said something that I've never heard anyone say before, which is I like moving.
I like to move. Yeah. I heard that too.
I'm a sicko. Like, I have problems. I like it.
Yeah. No, that's interesting though. So I guess then, is that what you did, I guess, to get started with real estate as you got into adulthood? You said you were managing your dad's properties. That kind of gave you the introduction. At what point did you start seeking investments yourself?
Well, so because of my dad, I had already ownership in 20, 30 properties before I was 18. So I understood the acquisition aspect. Wow. But the first property I bought on my own, I think I was in law school. I was in Florida in law school, and I bought just like it was a single family home, but it was in like a generic development in Plantation, Florida. Like, literally all the houses looked the same. But what I was looking for, there was like 6 or 7 on the market at the time. Remember, there's no internet, so you're not looking at pictures on the MLS. So it's much different. So there were 6 available in this giant, you know, macro development. And I just looked for the worst one. And literally it was a great place. They all were pretty like new. I went in, recarpeted the parts that needed to be carpeted, repainted the whole thing, cleaned and fixed everything, lived there for like a year and a half. And then I was like, I think I'm going to sell it. When I went to sell it, I made 25 grand at the time. This was like 1990, late 90s. And I was like, wait a minute. Now I'm starting to do what he taught me to do without even knowing. And there were still some of the properties that I was looking at were still on the market, because they were in this mid-range where they were too expensive. I just bought the crappiest one and did nothing, and it sold for more. Yep. So that was really the time. And then, of course, from there, I bought a single family in downtown Fort Lauderdale. And that's what really started like my own personal, like, kind of, I guess, flipping, or what I like to call back flipping is what I do a lot, which is flipping after I'm done with the house. I didn't realize how much he taught me until it started to crystallize kind of as an adult, and I started playing with houses. But it was interesting. I think the thing that helps me, that is hard for newer investors, is I've been in thousands of houses. You know, I was in thousands of houses before I was, 10. So I had an idea of what smell, feel, touch, what things are wrong, when you can tell. So I was very advanced in that area. And I think that helps me now. I can, evaluate a rehab cost in 5 minutes without, being like maybe $10,000 off, but for anything unforeseen. And I think that's the hardest thing for new investors, even for wholesalers. You're doing acquisition, but are you missing all the stuff in the basement that's going to be the hard cost to your, to your end buyer later?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and that's something that's, you can't really like learn without doing either, right? I mean, even with our business, we haven't been in it for nearly as long as you. We've only been doing this full time for 3 years. But in those years in Spokane, our local market, we have walked through so many properties. We've bought an insane number of properties, and we know the areas now that someone can give me like a street and like a zip code, and I can probably guess not only what the house is worth, but if I know like the bed bath count, I know what it looks like, right? Because there's only so many different options, and that's just such a huge advantage. And you got that at such a young age, like that's amazing. No, so that's cool. So you started buying investments at that point. Were you an agent by then, or were you just trying to be a professional investor?
No, I mean, I was a lawyer, so I went to law school in Florida, and then I was a prosecutor for 7 years, criminal defense attorney for 2 years. So the negotiation part of real estate is fun for me because nobody's going to prison or nobody died. So it's much easier. I take it much easier, which I always say on the negotiation aspect, like your biggest power play in real estate investing is your willingness to walk away. And I love to walk away because I know the pressure of, what it takes when you're negotiating for 30-year prison sentences. You need to walk away from things to make them know how important it is. So that's how I am as an investor. And I think that negotiation techniques have worked well for me because I'll drop any deal, which does mean there's deals that I probably shouldn't have dropped, but oh well, that happens. If somebody else does well on it, that's okay. But that's a big thing that I think is also hard for newer investors, especially acquisition. They're going out and they're just pushing the same thing. Like, hey, this is the number I have. That the number is really not as important as people think for off-market acquisition. You guys know this from all of your acquisition. It's just about solving problems. And if you're not talking to the person and finding, if they don't know where they're going, you're not buying the house. So you can sit there for an hour and talk about price, but if they don't know, they don't have any idea where they're going, or it's an old person and their relatives aren't taking them in and not going to a nursing home, what are you doing there? You're wasting time that you could be spending on something else. And that's where a lot of new investors are just banging their heads against, this doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's because you're not focused on the person. It's a relationship first business. Mm-hmm. The money stuff, there's hundreds of stories out there of investors who got a deal where they weren't the best offer, but the person liked them. I mean, and that's really the way that it works.
That's so true. I mean, like Mike and I remember when we first started out, like we thought, I guess we could just force them to sell to us if we just kept negotiating. And that's when we were focused on price. But the minute we realized that we were able to solve the problem, that's when our business really took off. It was about solving the problem. It's not about the deal. We tell that to new investors all the time. Like, you can't make somebody sell you their house if they have nowhere to physically move.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think one of the reasons that our eyes kind of opened to that too was we were, initial leads were all with these like people that had bankruptcies and things like that. So we thought that they were from these really bad positions. Okay. And they would have no choice. But then the first deal that we actually did, we bought from a dentist who had no real motivation to sell other than the fact that he wanted to 1031 exchange the money into something else, and he wanted it to be easy, and he was willing to take less money for that. And that was kind of like a light bulb moment, right? Of like, there are solutions. This is a solution focused business and not strictly just an asset focused business.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at foreclosures and pre-foreclosures, that's a popular list that people run. But for inexperienced people, they're leading with the pre-foreclosure. I know you're in pre-foreclosure. I know you're in foreclosure. Bro, are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. First of all, nobody wants to admit that. Mm-hmm. Two, why don't you just tell them that they've committed a crime? They feel terrible about it. You have to go on this long circuitous route about, hey, if you want to talk about the pre-foreclosure, you do it like it's a mistake. Like, that's the dialogue. And that's one of the things I'm an expert at, is dialogues. The dialogue, when you want to get to, hey, we have to talk about this at some point. I was looking through the records, this is wrong all the time. This is probably wrong for you, but it says that you have, you owe more than there. That's a side dialogue that gets them in where they can dispute or not. But you can't lead on a pre-foreclosure with like, you're broke and you didn't pay your mortgage, bad person. Can I buy your house for cash? They're never going to sell you the house. You're like a jerk. You have to massage your way in. And that's why, I think that's why a lot of the, guru training sessions out there, it's not being trained the right way, because nothing at scale is paying attention to the person. It's just paying attention to the dollars. Like people who are like, well, I'll make, I remember people as an agent, I'd get investors because we have a big investor portal, and they'd say like, well, I want to make like, 10 offers a week, but all super low balls. And I said, well, why would I do that? How's that a good use of my time? I look stupid every one that you send. I'm not going to do that. Like, do that with somebody else, because that's not the right way to get properties. It's just like what you read on a bandit sign or something.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so true.
But I mean, it's funny because like I don't know if there's another business that I can think of that is quite like that, and that's why people don't understand it. Because you can go and read like sales books, watch salespeople on YouTube gurus, and this is also the biggest red flags when you have like the wholesale investor sales coaches, right? That are heavily pushing like Wolf of Wall Street tactics, or like the chest pounding like I'm going to make 1,000 phone calls a day.
Yeah,
that isn't really how this business works at all. And sure, you do that, you're going to find suckers after a while, but you're not going to provide a good service for people, and your longevity in the business is going to be extremely small, extremely short rather. So it's just like, I don't know, is there any other business that's like that, that's sort of so sensitive? I mean, it's really niche, honestly.
Well, I mean, I think like I look at off-market acquisition a lot, from my days of like door-to-door salespeople. They're not expecting you, in wholesaling or off-market. They are expecting you for the most part, but they're not expecting the first call, and you're trying to figure out what their motivation is. Yeah. Door-to-door salespeople grew their business by figuring out if they hopefully had a good product, but what they were missing. And again, that's what we're telling people now to do. Find out what the problem is. You can't plug the problem. Every problem isn't plugged with cash. Actually, like 90 to 95% are not plugged with cash. Some person who owns their home outright, has been there 30 years, would like to go to Florida but doesn't know how to get there. They don't need your cash. They own it outright. They bought it for $12,500. It's worth $265 now. They don't need cash. Quick cash is completely irrelevant to them. It makes no difference, and that's where at scale people are failing, because they're not figuring out what I consider like the science and art of investing, instead of like what we were saying. It was just like, yeah, Wolf of Wall Street. Sure, you can bang the phones, but like whatever. Just you can hire VAs if that's the way you want to do it. Why would I do that? I don't even talk on the phone. So, so one thing that I learned over the years that I think is interesting in this context of what we're talking about is when I was doing hard off-market acquisition, I used a company that would create a lot of phone calls, but then I would do the phone calls differently. Once I got the first call in, I'd find out what they're doing. But what I would do is I would follow up every month just like everybody else, but I would never talk about the property ever. Like once out of every 4 months, I would ask about the property, and the same thing happened every time. They'd say like, "Hey, you didn't even ask about the property." And I'd say, "Bob, I know when you're ready to sell, you're gonna let me know. From now on, I'm just checking up and seeing how it's doing. Is your rent roll? Do you need anything? You need a contractor?" That's how you win properties. But again, that's long term. That means you're building a business, so you're going to be there for long term and not working a short term job where you're saying like, I want to be a wholesaler, so then I can be an investor. Then I want to be a multifamily investor, and then I want to be Bob Kiyosaki. Like, it doesn't go like that. There's a lot of steps in that you're gonna fall into a sinkhole doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's just that the problem is the get-rich-quick scheme. It sells more mastermind courses, right? So that's what everyone pushes.
Totally. It's more flash.
Yeah. So, well, also, I think that's a great transition. I know that this is something that you have figured out like a good, I guess, like niche with direct mail that we were talking about before you got on here, about how to give this similar sort of customer experience and messaging through the direct mail that you normally use. We're big proponents for direct mail. It's our main deal source. But one of the biggest pieces of pushback, I guess, that we always get from, people that engage with us or ask what we do is they just don't have the, the finances to be able to send out these massive, campaigns and different things. But you were saying before the show that you actually have a strategy that makes so that isn't quite as big of a deal, which I'll hear some more specifics on.
Yeah, I mean, the principles are built around, micro marketing versus macro marketing, or small scale versus spray and pray. Spray and pray is mailing out. You have enough money to mail out, and you have the background to field the calls, and it's a system. And when they get to you, it's already fully realized the appointment's going to happen, or you even have an acquisition team. But like for your brand new investor, like if you don't want to spend a lot, you should be first start out writing one-to-one letters, and your one-to-one letters should always be in the neighborhood where you live or where you're really looking. So it doesn't really work as much for out of state, because I'll explain. So I have one specific letter and or postcard that I know I can tell people about, because I know most of them aren't going to do this, because this is harder work. So like us as investors, we can expose our secrets because no one's going to do the work. But if you do this, it will work. It's called the Concerned Citizen Letter. You can do it as a letter or as a postcard. So there's a couple different ways to do it, depending on like what you use for your off-market acquisition. It's great if you can take a picture of it and then add it quickly to a postcard. That's how this works. So you walk by a house, if you're driving or walking for dollars in your area, your target area, you're going to take a picture of one of the dumpiest houses in the neighborhood, with all the classic signs that everybody knows to look for: broken windows, gutters hanging down, mail on the front, cars without wheels, no tracks in the driveway when it's snow. You're going to look for all of those high grass things that, the post office looks for when they're going to mark vacant, or just something that's messed up. You're going to make sure that you make a list of those. You're going to first start with that list and then see who all the absentee owners are. And you start with the farthest away. So if I'm looking in New Jersey and I have a list of 13, 7 are absentee, meaning they don't live there. So I'm down to 7. Then I'm going to look where they all live, and if I'll start in California. So I start in California because they're the most detached from the property. And the first thing I do is quickly run them to see if they own any other properties in the area, because what new investors don't know is that a lot of people you wouldn't expect will own 10, 15 properties all in the same area. Mm-hmm. And you want to know which other ones they have when you're calling, because they will appreciate that. If you talk to someone who owns 10 properties, they're going to say, actually, this one's doing pretty well, but I do have a crap one that I'd like to get rid of. That's your in, because that's the one that they'll sell or finance, by the way, also. But that's a side note. So generally, you make that list. You're going to go take a picture of the first property, the biggest dump. You're going to hopefully have done good skip tracing. You have their number. You're going to get in touch with them first. Your dialogue is the same every time. Hey, my name's Jonathan. I'm a local investor. I walk through the neighborhood all the time. I was actually walking by the property that you own at 123 Main Street. I know you live far away, so I just wanted to let you know it's actually not in great shape. So just as a concerned citizen, I want to let you know it doesn't look good. And I'm an investor too, so I thought you would want to know. I'm actually going to text you a picture right when we get off the phone of what the front looks like, where I think the biggest issues are. And look, I'm always through the neighborhood. So if you want, every month on the first of the month, I'm going to text you a new picture just to see, just to let you know if it's being kept up. P.S. If you're ever looking to sell, this is an area that I buy in, but I'm happy to help. I love working with other investors. That's the end of the dialogue. There's no sale in there whatsoever. Who's going to say no to that? That's the differentiator. What absentee owner who's an investor who's talking to another investor is going to say, actually, no, you know what? I'm good. I'm 3,000 miles away. You're walking through the neighborhood, but I don't want you to send me a picture every month. And that sets up your dialogue, and it also sets up that you're there to help. And honestly, I am there to help. I like other investors, and that's why you start with absentee, because I think absentee gets what investing is about. So it's an easier dialogue than talking to a 75-year-old, like we said before, who has nowhere to go. So that's a concerned citizen. And then your follow-up is pretty rigid every month. You're just going to send the same picture. It works, but again, like I said in the beginning, I can tell everybody this because most people aren't going to do it. They're like, well, I don't want to walk the neighborhood. I don't want to, send a text. I don't want to tell them what's wrong with the property. It's like, okay, but then you have to send more mailers. If you send that, there's no chance you're not going to get a response in 6 months. Seriously, almost no chance. Who's not responding to that? Because you're trying to create actions where someone really has no reason to say no. Why would someone say no?
Yeah, and so
and then you
exactly.
You go back through your list. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, we got a little bit of a delay. Sorry about that. So then you followed up with a letter as well. Or are you doing this all over the phone and SMS?
I do almost nothing over the phone. That first call, if it's a call back from something, if I'm doing it direct, I try everything else to get it in their hands. So I always suggest for that neighborhood investor who's just getting started to do handwritten letters that they write themselves. They don't put through a program. Write them yourselves, sign your name, explain who you are. Be the couple who's just looking for their first investment. But always mail absentee owners. I mean, absentee owners should be first on everybody's list because they're so much easier to have a dialogue with. I just had one yesterday. Guy's cool. It's just an easy dialogue. You're not, you want it to, I mean, we've all had so many FU phone calls in our life. You know which ones they're going to be. Why are you calling someone that's owned the property 7 years and they're a single family homeowner and you didn't look and they have a sign out in their yard, that one kid graduated, but if you looked on Facebook, they had 2 kids graduated. This is research. So if you're a small scale, you have to spend more time in research because you don't have the money to spend in that. So I'd rather buy a list for $1,000 and go bananas researching that list on every social media platform, figure out who's who, because that's going to be your only spend. You don't have the money to keep spending. So you have to figure out how you're going to do it with just one stamp, each time.
Yeah, I think that's I feel like that's a really good piece of advice because it's like instead of going a mile wide across your entire city or state or nationally, you're just going to go a mile, inch wide and a mile deep in your neighborhood where you should know really well your own backyard and just really gut it out. Because I can pretty sure guarantee you're going to find a deal that way. I got my first off market deal in my neighborhood, so that was pretty cool. So I can justify that.
You're creating a connection with an owner or an absentee owner because you're from there. So again, this is harder to do if you're doing it outside. But if you're picking markets outside, the way that I tell everyone to pick an out-of-state market is first make a list of every place you've ever lived in. Second, make a list of where your best friends and your family live. The first list can include where you went to school. And then look at the markets that are, quote, trending and see if they match up with any of those on your list. You might find one where you're like, actually, I lived there for 5 years. Why wouldn't? Then you have a built-in mark. The area, like you were saying before, Mike, the streets. So that helps you. You're looking for markets where you have a competitive advantage, and that's why you start, where you can walk. Hey, I'm walking right by your house. I walk my dog by your house every day. It looks like crap. I'm trying to help you. Your tenant has a blown-out window. A bird could fly through there at any time, They're going to appreciate that. I would appreciate that. I get all the calls, from the properties that we used to own and all the BS calls, that drives me crazy. I'd like a real call where somebody says, hey, did you know, so I'll tell you a quick story. We owned a property. This is awful. We owned a property in California and we were Airbnb-ing it at the time. This is before Airbnb. So it was on Vrbo or HomeAway at the time. And my sister actually lived close and we kept getting calls. And we're like, what the hell is the problem? We're getting calls from the police, like the HOA development was calling us, and it was California. It's not Florida, so you don't get as many HOA calls. And we found, they're like, there's people outside like smoking all the time. We're like, what? So we found out that the people that we did it was kind of like a midterm rental to, was running a drug rehab out of the place, and we didn't know. Nice. And we're like, oh, my bad. And because we had the correct contracts, we got them kicked out in like an hour in California. The police went over and just like jettisoned the whole thing. But again, if someone hadn't told us, we might have just been ruining the neighborhood because we didn't know. So, you want to be a participant and help other investors or, single family owners. If they're in California and they own one property in New Jersey, why do they want the property in New Jersey? They don't. You have to buy it from them.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is true. Yeah. This is true. That's funny. It's like a total side note here too. This is a hack that I found out that when you buy properties near older ladies, they will make sure if your tenants are doing something weird. So buy properties next to old ladies because they will call you all the time.
Sorry.
They report you to the city for the grass being too long. True. But
yeah, well, that comes with the territory as well. But one other thing on that, I think one thing that I've learned about pre-foreclosures or courthouse steps auctions, which again, they're not very popular after the pandemic. They've kind of like are gone. But the best acquisition method for courthouse steps foreclosures was, there's no access. So you're hoping for the best, but all you do is you knock across the street and you knock next door, both across the street and then next door. So you knock 5 houses around one. You'll know everything that you need to know about the outside from talking to the 5 neighbors. You won't need any more information. And that's what we used to do. We used to have investors would, come to use me as an advisor, and I would do the knock. I would do the data in advance for them. And then they were able to buy at courthouse steps because we had maximized the value by finding out like, hey, what's going on over there? And they'd literally tell you stories where you're like, okay, it's going to be a hoarder's house, and it was a hoarder's house.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great. That's good advice right there alone. I want to hear another one that you mentioned. So we've got the concerned citizen letter. I love that. And I think I know where this one's going to go, but the I want to be just like you letter.
Yeah. So this goes a little bit of what I said. Like you, whenever you're pulling a list, you always want to run that person through the tax database to see how many properties they own. So when you do catch one who owns, multiple properties, 5 to 10 in a specific area that you like, your letter is going to be the I want to be just like you. It's, hey, Bob, look, I'm a brand new investor. I'm looking for my first property. I ran you through the tax records because I was interested in 123 Main Street. I saw that you own 10 properties. Wow, that's so amazing. I would love to get some advice from you about how you got there. When I get older, I'd like to have 10 properties as well. Is there any advice that you could give me? And that's it. There's no sell. People are too hard on the sell. There's not an investor in the country, in the world. You guys know this because you are. If someone comes to you like that and they're like, can you just give me like 5 minutes of quick advice? Not like, hey, I want to take you to coffee. I'll never go to that. But if it's like, hey, I'm trying to do X. I don't know whether to do Y or Z. I've seen what you've done. That's impressive. Can you answer this question for me? All of us will answer that question. That's how, if there's, again, like I was saying, there's so many stories of those deals happening from people who came to the table trying to learn. And then an investor with 10 properties is like, listen, I'll just give you this one for a good deal. Like, I want to help you get your first deal. I have 10 properties. This one's crappy, but I'm going to give it to you for a crappy price. And that's how it works. Mm-hmm. So that one, investors all like to talk about themselves. So why aren't you feeding the ego while you're trying to do it and build a relationship?
That's a great point.
Here's the problem though, is the stuff that you're saying is too entrepreneurial and makes too much common sense, right?
Too simple.
The current mindset of all the wannabe investors is, this is part of hustle culture, whatever, is everyone's like, I need to be building a massive scalable system from the start. I'm like, you haven't even done a deal yet. Like, you gotta.
You don't even know what the system needs to look like yet.
Yeah, exactly, right. And it's funny. People will look at Dan and they're like, you guys scaled up really quick, because you started doing this in 2020. It's like, but what you miss is the 5 years before that, where Dan was DIY rehabbing student rentals, or the 3 years before we started where I was watching YouTube videos, like learning how to hang drywall. And me and my wife were like with tenants awkwardly watching us try to figure out how to put their bathroom back together.
Yeah.
Right. That people skip that part now and they always just want to try and make things scalable. But it doesn't make any sense, right? You kind of have to go through these learning processes to be successful long term. No, man, I love that. And that's such great advice, right? There's just so much wisdom in everything that you said. It's awesome.
Well, and one more I would add is it takes away the excuse of like not being able to start, because everybody can go get that data that you just talked about. They can handwrite the letters. I'm assuming most people listening to this podcast know how to read and write, so they could write those letters. And those are actually that copy is really good. And I 100% agree with on the concerned citizen letter. And I want to be just like you. You're absolutely right. You're talking to landlords that do want to talk about investments. That's why they're in it, right? They're in the game. So that's already going to be an easier conversation to open up, as opposed to knocking on someone's door and be like, I heard you're poor. Sell me your house.
Exactly. Exactly. I have one more for you if you guys want one more. I have a set of like 7, but I'll give you one more. It's called the Caretaker. Well, let's see if you guys can guess what it is.
The Caretaker?
The Caretaker.
Yeah. Is that like one where you go find where like the old people live and you say that you're concerned about how old they are? I don't know.
That's in the ballpark.
Be the old people's kids.
Yeah, it's in the ballpark. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the Caretaker is an old person letter. It has to be handwritten because they open their mail. Nobody else does. I literally don't open my mail for a year at a time. They open their mail, and it's somebody who's lived there, owns the property outright, and like they've owned it like we're not talking 10 years. These are ones where you're looking 30, 40 years owned, and you have a feeling like if you run them on Spokio or something, they're like 80s. So you write the letter, and you have to be honest about it. Like, dear, Bob and Sally, I live in this neighborhood. I always walk by your house. I love the character of the house. I seen you've been there for a really long time. I'm looking to make, purchases in your neighborhood. I'd love to come over and have a look at your house. Are you ever planning on moving? And if not, is there anything that I can help you do around your house? And that's the beginning thing. And then the second part comes at the bottom of the letter. You say, what we really do, whatever with your group, or what we're looking to do is we're looking to, buy homes where people have lived in them for a long time and then become the next caretaker of the home. We're not house flippers who going to break everything and ruin all the character, because that's always what they care about. It's like, we want to maintain the integrity of the house and take what you did to the next level. That's really like a dialogue when you get in the house. You use the caretaker part more. You say no, we're not going to demo your whole house, because that's personally how I do renovate. I want to keep the character of the house. But if you've done enough old person options, they're always more worried while they're still alive that you're going to ruin their house. They will not sell to you if they think you're going to gut their house down to the studs. You're not going to win. They care about the house way more than your stupid fake money. And that's what I think, again, is it's just a mindset shift. Everything is a mindset around, can you help someone? So the dialogue, that intro letter isn't perfect. I probably adjusted a little, but that's the general gist of how it works for the caretaker. When you meet them, that's when you start the caretaker. And we actually do that in on-market acquisition. Part of when we're writing offers on just regular properties, that's part of our language is always, we want to take over as caretakers of your home. You've done a great job. It makes people feel good. And it's true. Look, they've lived there for 40 years. The one thing you have to remember about old people's homes is people are like, oh, they haven't done any. The maintenance on old people's homes is always immaculate. Everything's in good shape. Furnace, AC, anything that they have is in great shape. They just have giant carpet everywhere and bad furniture, and they've never done a cosmetic update. Kitchen's old. You're probably going to blow out one wall, but that's where you're saving money, is that they've done the upkeep because they take care of their house. It's just not, cosmetically updated.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
The thing I love about that letter too, and that copy that you just is there anything I can do to help out around the house? And this goes back to my first off market deal. I own the house next door, and it was an older lady in her 80s. And I wasn't even trying to buy her house, but I had mentioned, hey, if you need any help with anything, just let me know. Well, lo and behold, she needed help, and she wanted me to go to the store every time I was down there and buy her a pack of smokes. So I would get her a pack of Marlboro 100 Silvers, and that was her thing. And then she unfortunately passed away in her sleep. And the family that was there was like, Mom wasn't supposed to be smoking. And I didn't say anything, right? I just kind of kept my mouth shut on that.
Yeah.
But because that relationship was fostered and I was helping her out, and the kids knew about me. And then eventually what they said was just what you said. Mom would love to have this home be, it's right across from university, but be for students. Mom always liked the university, she liked the students. So we want to sell to you because you would keep, kind of what Mom would want. And so it was a really fascinating learning opportunity for me. And I think it's just in exact alignment with this caretaker letter. It's not about the house or the money. It's about the character of the home and really being there to help them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, no, that's great stuff. It goes back to the root, right? It's all about solving problems and providing service to people. Cool. So before we jump into the last minute question, just for context, I would love if you could give some insight on what exactly your business is now and what your investments are now, because I'm sure you're not still going out walking for dollars with how long you've been in the business.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is I'm obsessed with houses because of my on-market team. I mean, I'll show sometimes 20 houses in a week for on-market. I look at every dump on the market. I just like looking at houses. I work with hundreds of investors, so there's opportunity for me to look. But my investment portal's small now. During the pandemic, my sister and I sold a lot of the properties that we took from my dad because there was no, the prices were high and we didn't really want them anymore. So we maintain, both her and I have an LP stake in it's about 15 bays, an industrial park in Bridgehampton, which is probably the best investment my dad ever made. He bought it when it was just nothing, and we've held it for years and years. We almost had a hedge fund offer. I mean, it's a sizable asset. And then we have a couple single family rentals, which we always did single family rentals. That was my thing. I've never really dabbled much in multifamily myself personally. So we were always single family. We were doing short-term rentals before Airbnb existed. 20 years ago, we were doing short-term rentals because I don't like hotels. So I haven't stayed in a hotel in 20 years if it's more than like a day. Because I like having a kitchen and everything. So we really believed in short-term rentals, and I still do. But like everybody's seeing, the market got oversaturated. And, you know, the problem with investing now, which has affected why I'm not buying right now, which we're talking about in the pre-call, is that non-investors have just gone, you know, ham on buying investment properties. Look at what happened in Arizona with all of these fake iBuyers who had money. They buy 100 properties, overvalue on purpose, and then they're getting rid of them for, you know, way less. It's a disaster. So that's had a cyclical effect in all the markets. Like right now, with the way that it went from the pandemic to the boom now, I'm in New Jersey. There's not a deal that even looks okay to me. But I mean, my last flip I only completed 2 months ago. We bought it for $555. We put in about $180, and it sold for $930. So we did great. But that's the spectrum of what I do. Is it used to be the formula was more like you could do 300 buy-in, 60 reno, 60 profit. That was like generally easy. But when we hit the pandemic, like that was no longer available. That 300 costs 375, and then there's no spread. So to get the spread now, you have to go, for me buying for flips, I'll buy in that 5 to 650 range. But they have to be homes that your regular first-time buyer is not desperate enough to try and get. Has to have either like a structural issue. The last one we bought needed a new septic, which cost 42 grand. So we know they're not going to do it. It has to be something that's just like, it doesn't look right. And we also did a ranch, mid-century modern ranch, the last one. And we knew that no developers are going to, or builders are going to like buy that and renovate it. They like cookie cutter. Like anything that takes like figuring out how to make it cool, the metrics don't work for them. So now for me personally, I'm looking for more ranches and oddity houses that I think I can flip and get better deals on. But, you know, we were saying before, the acquisitions now for me are like almost none. I look all the time, and now I'm starting to, you know, go into New York a little bit to look for, I think, what will be longer term, you know, short-term rentals in areas where there aren't a lot. But I like commercial mixed use a lot. I was under contract on one right in my town around the corner from me now, and it just fell apart at the end. But that's my target. 2022, I really was focused on Main Street mixed use. I think that's going to be a huge asset just because commercial's taken such a big hit. And the reason why I call it Main Street mixed use is because Main Streets are just awesome. They have the potential to revitalize towns. So if you look in a lot of main streets, there's tons and tons with retail on the bottom, residential on the top. All the residential on the top are renting under market value and not renovated in most towns unless they've hit like this boom. So that's an area where you can actually have an impact. And I love mixed use for people who are entrepreneurial spirited. You know, maybe you want to open your flipping business and you need an office. Great. You have a mixed use property. There's 2 retail spaces. You're not going to lose money by using your own space. So I've owned commercial. We owned a commercial 5-plex in Westchester for 25 years. And then we sold it to one of the tenants. And that gave me the idea of like, you know what, I want to open an independent bookstore with my kids. And that's what I wanted to do there. So when I do buy mixed use, I'm going to put one side my bookstore, and then the other side probably my team or my flipping business, and then rent the units up top. I just think it's a great scale for investors to look at. And one thing I always talk about a lot, because I don't think a lot of people know, is, you know, for new investors who are looking at house hack and are into multifamily, they have to remember that you can do an FHA house hack on a mixed use property if it's more than 50% residential. So if you have one retail space on the bottom and then you have 2 floors of residential, you can house hack that, even though it's a commercial property. Most people don't know that. It's a great, great way of doing it. And remember that commercial properties are just going to be sitting longer now. There's just a glut of commercial everywhere.
Yeah. Love it. You just dropped so many tidbits in there, and you go rewind that and listen to that again. 'Cause there's, I mean, just the way that, like, again, the way that you like look at stuff, it's so simple, and it's so like, I'm saying to someone, I was like, why don't we think about things like this? It just makes no sense. Like, honestly. So, but you're right. So like learning to create those opportunities and recognizing, what is going to be in demand in the future. And we talk to so many people that their idea of flipping houses is they're still going to be buying these carpet paint flips. Like you talked about the 300 purchase, the 60 reno, and the 60 profit. That doesn't exist anymore. Like, honestly,
Just doesn't happen.
It does, but it's very, very rare. And it's not common enough that you can build a business off of that.
It doesn't exist though. Yeah, it doesn't exist right now because single family home buyers got so desperate when the rates were better that they were buying all those, even though they don't know how to do the rehab. There are real estate agents convincing regular first time home buyers that they can do a rehab, and then they're going to end up spending 2 to 3 times more than they thought, and they're going to be underwater soon because most real estate agents don't know anything about investing. They don't know how much it costs to do this rehab. Oh, a kitchen, yeah, that would be $7,000. Really? Looks like, 45 grand to me. So, that's what's happening. Yep. Investors are now in competition with regular home buyers who are desperate because there's no properties on the market. So they're overpaying for stuff that I'm not, I'll be like 50,000 below or sometimes 100,000 below. So I'm not going to make that offer. I don't want to waste anybody's time.
Yeah.
1,000,000% agree.
Yeah. And that's
Mike and I were talking about that all last year. We saw agents, and I was selling some of our leads, and you could see these new time home buyers. And I'm like, this is not something you should be buying because like, you don't know, like the roof's not great. This is an investor listing, not a new first time home buyer with a baby on the way.
Wait, I'm going to tell you one story because I know we got to wrap up. But so I was in an absolute disaster in a great area, Glenridge, New Jersey. House was so cool, but not in any way for first-time home buyers. And I'm in there and I'm listening, and it's an agent, and it's a husband and a very pregnant wife, like 8 months. And I was on the second floor, and there were 2 floorboards loose, like you could have gone through. So I went down and I said, listen, I just want to tell you, be careful upstairs in the room. You could fall through the floorboards. And what I was doing, I was trying to tell them that this house is not for you. Please leave. So I was with somebody, and I started talking louder on purpose because I was trying to help them. And I don't know if those people bought that house, but a first-time home buyer bought that house. That house, I bet someone was telling them, cost $40,000 to $50,000 to renovate. I had it estimated at like $250,000. So it is a big problem, and that's why as an on-market team, we work with so many investors because we know more. But it's very hard out there to look at what's happening. And agents, they just don't know. I mean, they can claim that they do, but 99% of agents don't really know anything about investing or rehab costs or multifamily or, how the rent rolls affect or when to use cap rate. So, you really have to factor that in as an investor. And again, that's what we're up against now. So why buy when we're up against people who are making bad decisions? I don't want to make bad decisions. Or if I do, I want to make sure it was my bad decision to make.
Yeah, right.
For sure.
Not pushing somebody else into it. Awesome. Such great advice there. All right, we're going to go into the end of the show here. I know you got a hard stop here in just a few minutes. We'll make these quick.
I'm ready.
We have the same 3 questions that we ask everyone who comes on the show. The first question is, what is your craziest real estate investing story?
Oh, I'll tell the quick version because it's my idiot story. Yeah. I bought the house my favorite house ever, and it was 2007 and a half. We were trying to move to New York at the time from Florida. This house was the best house ever. I mean, I built a lagoon pool, 3-car garage in the back, full of generator. Like it was the best house I've ever had. So I was convinced that it was worth a lot. I listed it for sale for $2.3 million. My realtor was like, I wasn't licensed at the time. My realtor was like, you're not close. Like, this is way too high. I was like, I know what I'm doing. The exact client that I hate right now as an agent. Listed it for 2.3. First week, we get an offer for 1.4. I probably never have said so many expletives in my life because I was so high on myself that it was worth 2.3. Well, guess right. I declined the offer, told them to screw off. 2008 dropped right around the corner. Ended up selling it like a year and a half later for like in the 800s. So, that's just one you just got to take it on the chin. Completely 100% my fault. My fault.
Yeah, that's crazy. Wow. That's quite a shift. Man, yeah, it's all right. It's $600,000.
Yeah, it's just pennies, right?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Second question. What is the number one piece of advice you would give to either a new investor looking to get started or to a small time investor looking to take their business to the next level?
Build as many relationships as possible. Don't buy things, build things. See who's not trying to sell you a course. Go to in-person meetups. Go to in-person meetups where there's no lenders allowed, no pitches. RIAs can get a little bit sketchy. If they're charging you, like we run meetups and there's no pitches allowed. If anyone makes a pitch, I immediately throw them out. And we've been successful at those for over a year, where it's a safe space for investors to meet each other, build relationships. During the pandemic, we were all locked down and we had an online Zoom group just for Philadelphia. Inside that group, we did 44 deals in that year just by having them be comfortable with each other. The number one way to get out of analysis paralysis is to go to in-person meetups and see people just like you who are doing deals. You will stop crunching the numbers and get your ass out in the field.
Love it.
Boom.
Simple.
Easy.
All right, Jonathan. And then last question, where can people find you, follow you, and reach out to you if you'd like them to do so?
Yeah, I do a lot of social. You guys probably know. On Instagram, I'm Trust Greene, and that Greene has an E at the end, and that's the same on TikTok. My YouTube is Jonathan Greene RE. And then, of course, my podcast, which Mike was on, is Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. And just like I love being on your guys' podcast on Collecting Keys, I love the idea of podcasts in general. So I think it's important for people to just kind of adjust to getting knowledge that way, driving in your car, walking on the treadmill. It's just a great way to just be able to put in knowledge where you maybe would just be listening to something stupid instead. You can get so much out of it. But yeah, that's where I am. I was telling you before, I've migrated over to Threads because I don't use Twitter, so I'm playing around there. But generally, Instagram's where you can find me. Usually respond to all realistic DMs that aren't asking me if they want to make me a logo or if I need more leads, which I don't.
Or if you want to buy Bitcoin.
Do you need some help with your short form content? You get a lot
of I'm sorry. That's actually a good one. Anybody who's on YouTube, we get 15 a day. Hey, I can cut up your, okay, I know that AI can do that as well. So
yeah, exactly. But no. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jonathan, man. It was really great to reconnect with you again. And I really appreciate you coming on the show. So guys, absolutely reach out to Jonathan. In case you can't tell, he is one of the most knowledgeable people that you will meet in this game. He has been around for a long time. He has seen it all, done it all. And the funny thing is he has a lot of other awesome stories and experiences too that unfortunately couldn't come out in this quick hour. So we connected beforehand when I was on his show. He has all sorts of stuff that he is very, very knowledgeable on. So reach out with him and inquire, and he would be happy to chat with you. Besides that, guys, please share this with anybody who would find this show interesting or entertaining, or even if they wouldn't, just like steal their phone and like download the episode. It boosts our numbers and it helps us out. So you should definitely do that. And you can also go to collectingkeyspodcast.com/free to get our free 5-step guide, start generating off-market leads. And then, maybe one day you can be crushing it just like Jonathan is. So awesome. Well, thanks so much for listening, guys. And we'll talk to you all next week.
Thanks, guys.